What's up, YouTube? So Arataki Itto is having his second rerun, I think, actually, and I want to give you a detailed review and guide for him. Now, Arataki Itto is a very complex character to give a guide about because his power level depends on your account exactly, and I will get on to this. I'll get into this later on in the video, but for now, enjoy. First of all, I'll go over Arataki Itto's talents. Now, his talents have one basic attack, his E, and his burst, like every other character. His passive talents are also pretty good. I'll get into those later though. His normal attacks are what you'll be focusing on. With his normal attacks, you build something called Superlative Super Strength, which you can build about 5 stacks for. And if you hold your charge attack button, he'll do uppercuts with his Claymore, and you'll get rid of those Superlative Super Strength stacks, like that. Arataki Itto's elemental skill is the least impactful part of his kit. He just throws out his bull and he does some decent damage, but it's not really worth focusing on because of its low scaling. Though one important thing to note is that if you use it inside of Arataki Itto's burst, its damage gets multiplied. So do that. Arataki Itto's burst is the second important part of his kit. His burst transforms all of his attacks into Geo and also makes a lot of his defense into his attack. The scaling is dependent on your burst level, but the damage inside of your burst is from your normal attack talent. This is why leveling up your normal attack is more important than leveling up your burst. This is why also using Ushi inside of your burst does more damage because you have more attack inside of your burst. Because of this, characters like Goro, who can buff Arataki Itto's defense, are very valuable to him. As for the priority of leveling up talents, number 1 is his normal attack, number 2 is his burst, and number 3 is his Ushi. I also recommend bringing Itto up to 90 because it gives him a massive defense boost compared to the boost that it gives to attack scaling characters. So Arataki Itto is a DPS character, just like Hu Tao and Albedo, that I would recommend bringing all the way up to 90. Also, you should probably level up his normal attack and his elemental burst at least up to 8, and his Ushi can be at 4 to 6, that's fine. Now I'll talk about his meta strength. Arataki Itto, as I said before, is a very difficult character to gauge his strength on your account, and this is for a few reasons. Number 1 is because of the character he needs and the characters that he doesn't need. Similarly to Hu Tao, he does not need Bennett to buff him that much because his attack stat inside of his burst is high enough already. But unlike Hu Tao, he also does not benefit from Bennett's C6 buff, which is also a very big thing to keep in mind. Another massive thing to keep in mind is that he gets a lot of benefit from Geo Resonance, which means that you probably want a shield on him, which is where Zhongli comes in. And if you have Zhongli on a team, you probably do not want Bennett on that team. Another thing to keep in mind is that he already has a good buffer for him in the character Goro, because Goro buffs his defense and his Geo damage by a decent amount as well. And if you have Geo, Goro, Zhongli, and Arataki Itto in a party, then you already have 3 characters for Goro's buff, so you also want Zhongli there too. And this last slot is a flex slot, but it's probably not going to be Bennett. It's either going to be an animal grouper like Venti or Kazuha, or it's going to be a character like Albedo. And Albedo is actually one of Itto's best supports because of his all-field particle generation. Because Itto's reliant on his burst, he likes to have as much energy recharge on his character, as much particle generation on his characters as possible. So because of this, if you do not have Zhongli, Goro, or Albedo, Arataki Itto is one of the worst DPS pulls for you in the game. But if you have these characters, Arataki Itto can be the best DPS pull for you in the game. Not the best, I'd say he's close to the best, behind characters like Ganyu, Aika, and Raiden. Another thing to keep in mind is that having C6 Goro is very good for Itto because of the massive buff he gains from that singular constellation. If you have C6 Goro, I would 100% recommend going for Arataki Itto, especially if you have Albedo and Zhongli. But if you only have Albedo and not Goro, then Arataki Itto even still is not a good choice, even though Albedo is a 5-star. On top of this, Albedo, Zhongli, and Arataki Itto are 3 exclusive 5-star characters, so to get his full potential, you have to spend a lot of Primo Gems. And Goro has not been featured on many banners, unlike other characters like Bennett or Xingqiu, so chances are you do not have him or don't have many constellations for him. But his reliance on specific characters is also a massive upside. Say you're running International on one side and you already have a Bennett and a Shangling on one side. You do not have a Bennett for the other side of the Abyss. A very good choice is to use Arataki Itto because he does not rely on Bennett's buff, and rather relies on Zhongli. So not having 2 DPS characters that are reliant on Bennett, such as say Scaramouche and Child, is very good. So you can run International on one side and Itto Hyper Carry on the other side. That being said, my general power level that I think Itto is at for most accounts will be posted up on screen right now. Do not take this with a grain of salt because it really depends on your account. Arataki Itto could go from a C tier character to an S tier character depending on what characters you have on your account. So you really need to consider this before rolling for him. And now to talk about some pros and cons about Itto, starting off with his cons because I've already covered his pros a little bit. His first major con is the artifacts that he needs to farm. The artifacts that he needs to farm are only best in slot for him and Goro and Albedo. And it's only slightly Goro's best in slot because 2-piece Defender Will and 2-piece Husk is also pretty good. Now, this is not very good because even the other set from that dungeon is not good for anybody. It's okay for Kokomi, but Tenacity is overall better, at least in my opinion. Because of this, he's a very inefficient character to farm artifacts in. On top of this, you can't use him to farm the artifacts because the wolves in that domain have corrosion. So you have to use another character, and if you do not have another DPS, it's just a pain in the ass to farm that. So keep that in mind as well. Now let's go over a pro for him. A big pro for him are the weapons he can use. He has very good free-to-play options, one being the craftable 4-star weapon, the White Blind, and the other one being the Serpent Spine, which is the Battle Pass weapon. The craftable White Blind is one of the best weapons for him because it's a great defense stat stick and its passive is also very good for him if you can build a few stacks on it before you use your burst. Serpent Spine is also very good for him because he uses Zhongli, and with Zhongli he does not take that many hits. Now one last pro and con I would like to cover is him being a hyper carry. This is good and bad, and it's also kind of untrue. So first, why it's good. It's good because you have to only invest in Arataki Itto. You can put all your artifacts into Arataki Itto. But this is actually not the case, because if you have Albedo on the team, you have to also put the artifacts on Albedo. So you have to farm for 2 characters despite him being the hyper carry, unlike if you're playing Xiao, where you only have to invest into Xiao. Why it's bad is because you can't have that many off-field damage dealers apart from Albedo, and he's also confined to only playing one team with Zhongli, Goro, and Albedo. There's a little bit of change, but if you change up that team, there's no point of playing Arataki Itto over other characters. If you want to put Shangling in, why don't you just play Rational or Child National? If you want to put Xingqiu in, why not just play Hu Tao and make it Hu Tao double Geo? So sometimes you have to figure out the opportunity cost of running the hyper carry over just running a character that can use reactions and a character that can utilize off-field damage dealers better than Itto can. With all that being said, my final verdict on Arataki Itto is if you should avoid him, if you should consider him, if you should pull for him, or if you should full on go for him, spend all your primos on him. I would say you should pull for him for the 4 stars on his banner if you really like it, so you'd be fine if you got Arataki Itto. He is a good DPS, but he's very reliant on his supports to do damage, and you need to have those specific supports. And if you do not have any of those supports, I'd say to go and avoid him fully because he's just not worth it. If you do not have Goro and Albedo, there's no point of going for him. If you only have Goro and not Albedo, maybe there's a point. I should say to consider him. but not pull on his banner. And with that being said, that is the end of this guide. Please subscribe. I'm only at 30 subscribers and I would like more. And bye bye. One last thing, if you guys would like to see any future videos like DPS showdowns or character guides in the future, please tell me in the comments below. Also, if you guys have any constructive criticisms or comments for me, please also tell me kindly. And one last thing, I have a DPS showdown coming out in 2 days of Raiden versus Ayato, the reruns for 3.3, and in the future I'll have guides for them as well, so enjoy those.